Suranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Shriya Bonachari Yamuna Shriya Bonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Balava Giri Baradhari Jaya Gopijana Balava Giri Baradhari Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Balava Giri Baradhari Gopijana Balava Giri Baradhari Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada 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 ki jai. Nam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajaka Charja Stotara Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Shekaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dhamma ki jai. Shri Navadvip Dhamma ki jai. Shri Mayapur Dhamma ki jai. Mathura Dhamma ki jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dhamma ki jai. Shri Govardhan ki jai. Shri New Govardhana Dhamma ki jai. Shamaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayanam namaskritam naram chaivam narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat nastaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utama shlokir bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 17th chapter, text number 40? 39. Text number 39. Punascha yachamanaya jatarupa datprabhu tatonritamadan kaman rajovairam chapanchamam punascha yachamanaya jatarupa madatprabhu Tadanitam madan kaman Rajo Vairam cha Panchamam Punaschaya cha Manaya Jatarupamadat Prabhu Tato Niplam Madan Kaman Rajo Vairam cha Panchamam Puna again cha also Yacha Manaya to the beggar Jatarupam gold Adat give away Prabhu the king Tataha whereby Anritam falsehood Madam intoxication Kamam lust Rajaha on account of passionate mood Bairam enmity Cha also Panchamam the fifth one. Translation: the personality of Godhead asked for something more, and because of his begging, the king gave him permission to live where there is gold, because wherever there is gold there is also falsity, intoxication, lust, envy, and enmity. Repeat, the personality of Kali asked for something more, and because of his begging, the king gave him permission to live where there is gold, because wherever there is gold, there is also falsity, intoxication, lust, envy, and enmity. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Although Maharaj Pariksit gave Kali permission to live in 4 places, it was very difficult for him to find the places, because during the reign of Maharaj Pariksit there was no such places. There were no such places. Yeah. Therefore, Kali asked the king to give him something practical which could be utilized for his nefarious purposes. Maharaj Pariksit thus gave him permission to live in a place where there is gold, because wherever there is gold, there are also the above mentioned 4 things, and over and above them, there is enmity also. So the personality of Godhead became gold standardized. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, gold encourages falsity, intoxication, prostitution, envy, and enmity. Even a gold standard exchange and currency is bad. Gold standard currency is based on falsehood because the currency is not on a par with the reserved gold. The basic principle is falsity, because currency notes are issued in value beyond that of the actual reserved gold. This artificial inflation of currency by the authorities encourages prostitution of the state economy. The price of commodities becomes artificially inflated because of bad money and artificial currency notes. Bad money drives away good money. Instead of paper currency, actual gold coins should be used for exchange, and this will stop prostitution of gold. Gold ornaments for women may be allowed by control, not by quality, but by quantity. This will discourage lust, envy, and enmity. When there's actual gold currency in the form of coins, the influence of gold in producing falsity, prostitution, etc. will automatically cease. There will be no need for an anti-corruption ministry, for another term of prostitution and falsity of purpose. The verse again, the personality of Kali asked for something more, and because of his begging, the king gave him permission to live where there is gold, because wherever there is gold, there is also falsity, intoxication, lust, envy, and enmity. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum lungayate girim yat kripa taraham bande Shri Guru Dinat Tarane. It seems that in this purport, Prabhupada is advocating a gold standard. Before I was a devotee, I saw a film called Gold Fever. It was about gold in Brazil. Brazil is famous for having very large gold reserves. There were on the Amazon River in a part of Brazil, there were rafts 4 rafts on a very rapidly coursing down river. And each raft was sponsored or supported by a gold exploration company. And under these rafts, a diver would submerge into the riverbed, down into the riverbed, in a diving bell. 4 of them. They were side by side. They were quite close together. But once in a while, because of envy and falsehood, the competing raft people would cut the air supply of the diver, and the diver would drown in the water. That went on. That was part of this film. And another part of it showed people carrying gold up from the gold mines where gold was in ore deposits or alluvial deposits in the mud, and they were carrying on their heads these things that looked kind of like woks, full of mud that had little flecks of gold in them. And when they got to the top, they were treated to a kind of a shanty town, Brazilian shanty town that was full of prostitutes. They were naked, and they had $100 bills all over their bodies, and there was also whiskey and different forms of gambling, and it just showed that wherever there's gold, there's always falsity and prostitution and these things, these elements of bad things that come with gold. When I lived in New Zealand, there was a very popular expression, "good as gold." Gold is considered a very good thing, but actually gold is a form of badness, a form of evil. Sometimes it's called yellow stool. I don't know if Prabhupada referred to it that way, but it's sometimes referred to it that way. So in some ways, Prabhupada was advocating the gold standard. The fact that paper money is issued in excess of the actual gold that's reserved in the banks is a very unfortunate situation. Gold wealth is measured in such a flimsy thing as paper. Even more flimsy are the fact that wealth is measured in invisible little computer impulses on computer drives all over the world, where millions of dollars are exchanged every minute. Based on what people read on their computer screens, their little invisible electronic impulses. So wealth has become more and more ethereal. First paper, and then computer impulses, and so on and so forth. It's part of the evils of Kali Yuga, anyway. It's very difficult to what Prabhupada did. What he did in many places was gave practical, gross examples of things that are very difficult to understand. For example, the concept of simultaneously one and difference. Achintya beta tattva. Achintya means inconceivable, and beta abeta tattva. Beta simultaneously one beta and abeta different. He gave us the example of the sun and the sun rays being simultaneously one and different. So you could have the sun, which is one thing, and the sun rays, which are another thing, but they're simultaneously the same thing. They're one and they're different. And he also gave the example, there are many examples, but another gross example that he gave about one and difference was a recorder. And in those days, when Prabhupada was traversing the earth, there weren't such things as MP3 players. They had tape recorders. So he said that my voice, when I speak into a tape recorder, is recorded on the tape and played back, sounds like I'm there, but I'm not there. So that was his example of one and difference. And he also said in a famous letter to Kirtananda, I think it was in 1974, that the concept of unity and diversity, which is a kind of a modern day translation of one and different, of Achintya Beta Tattva, should be discussed every year among all the leaders of ISKCON in Mayapur. So it's not a simple thing, but it can be glimmerly or perceived by these kind of gross examples. It's a very difficult concept, unity and diversity, beta tattva, one and different, but it can be grasped very slightly by these kind of gross examples. So that's one of the things that makes very complex and difficult to understand philosophy partially at least, understandable. And that was one of the great gifts of our movement, that very difficult to understand philosophy can be expressed in terms of simple, ordinary, everyday, gross examples. Another example is, well, we have today telecommunications. People can speak over the telephone. It sounds like the person is there, but that person might be on the other side of the world. So that's an example of one indifference. So the idea is that that we have to think to translate these very complex philosophical principles into everyday examples. It's sort of like what we call thinking on your feet in America. I don't know if they have that expression here, thinking on your feet. Yeah. And one example was that one devotee, I think it was Giriraj Swami, in 1977 went into Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada was in very ill health, and it was just months before Prabhupada departed from this world. And Giriraj asked Prabhupada, he said, if we follow the regular principles, go to the morning program, and follow your instructions, then the movement will progress without serious inhibitions. And Prabhupada said yes. And then he was, the questioner was very satisfied, and he started to leave the room. And as he was leaving, he heard Prabhupada say, almost as an afterthought, and use your intelligence and organization. And I talked with Giriraj afterwards recently, and that exchange actually happened. Prabhupada said, use your intelligence and organization. What he was indirectly saying was that to convince people about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, sometimes you have to use your intelligence and think of examples, gross examples. That's kind of thinking on your feet. In 1999 in Poland, one devotee who was associated with the Bhaktivedanta Institute was giving a talk at the University of, I think it was the University of Ostrich in Warsaw. And part of his talk was saying that we have to establish a new paradigm in biology. We can't rely on Darwinian evolution as being the absolute truth. It's been something like 140 years since Darwin's theory, and he talked about the missing link, and for 140 years that missing link has not been found. During the question period, this devotee was challenged a little by a man who, it was in there was a big audience, probably 400 or 500 people in the audience. And this man in a very challenging voice said, why is it that we should believe everything that you're telling us? I mean, you're talking about changes in the molecular structure, you're talking about changes in the belief in evolution and so on. And thinking on his feet, the person who delivered the talk said, I'm very surprised that a person in the land of Copernicus was born and lived and raised in Poland, and he changed the thinking of the general thinking of the world's astronomers from a geocentric or Earth-centered universe to a heliocentric or sun-centered universe. That was Copernicus's great so-called contribution to modern thought. And so, thinking on his feet, the devotee said that I'm very surprised to hear this coming from a person in the land of Copernicus, where there was a major, because of Copernicus, there was a major paradigm shift in what people thought was the structure of the universe, and I was advocating that there should be a complete overhaul, complete restructure, a shift in the paradigm of modern biological discovery. And I'm saying that instead of thinking that people evolved from simpler forms like apes and insects, that they evolved from something higher, and this went on. This exchange went on, and the man was finally defeated. And he was, although he was a very challenging kind of questioner, he sat back down quietly and was defeated. And then the audience applauded because this devotee had won the debate, so to speak. Another incident occurred. I heard this on a recording in 1977. I think it was in April of 1977. Prabhupada had given a talk on the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it was in the temple in what's now called Mumbai. And it was a very sort of matter of fact type of lecture. And at the end of the lecture, people in those days, they didn't have many microphones, so they just had to come up and speak into the same microphone that the speaker was speaking into. So one man came up from the audience and asked a question. He said something about that you don't see any pictures or photographs. I guess they didn't have cameras in those days of Ramchandra, but they had illustrations. And he said, we don't see any pictures of Ramchandra. Why is that? And how do you address that? And Prabhupada kind of shouted back at him and said, well, you have to know by hearing rather than seeing. And the man said, well, I have to see. And then Prabhupada came back with a very heavy rejoinder and said, but you have to see, you have to hear. Hearing is more important than seeing. And then it kind of escalated into a bit of a shout from the Vyasa-san. And Prabhupada was telling this person that he had to learn how to hear and how to learn from hearing. And finally, this man was defeated, and he sat back down in the audience. And then the person who was hosting the whole event said, if there's any more questions, please come up and speak into the microphone. And no one came. And the person sitting next to Prabhupada said, I think you scared them. But people were not expecting such a vociferous and irate and angry volley to come from the Vyasa-san, from a sadhu and the Vyasa-san. That's probably why no one was able to hear. So to challenge, to say, to have any questions, because they knew that they would get defeated. So this is part of Prabhupada's expertise of thinking on one's feet, and it happened. It's even a scriptural principle when Ashwatthama had assassinated or killed these 5 sleeping sons of Draupadi in their sleep. He had committed a very heinous act, and Bhima was advocating that he should be killed immediately. And at first, Krishna was there, and he was with the Pandavas and Draupadi, and they were advocating the death of Ashwatthama. But Draupadi, being very gentle, wanted him saved, didn't want him to be killed. And Yudhisthira also sided with Draupadi. He wanted the life of Ashwatthama to be spared. So then Arjuna was baffled. He was kind of caught between two conflicting ideas. One is that Ashwatthama should be killed, another one is that his life should be spared. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, that it's very difficult to know what to do in the case of conflicting instructions. That they're both scripturally correct, because Ashwatthama was a Brahmin, or the son of a Brahmin at least. He should not be killed, but he had committed a very anti-Vedic act, and therefore a very anti-Kshatriya act, and therefore he had to be killed. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's stated that for one who is famous, infamy is worse than death. So Arjuna had to decide what to do, how to kill him and not kill him at the same time, which was practically impossible. But what he eventually did was he used his intelligence. He had to think on his feet. He had to use his what Prabhupada called sharp intelligence. I think the Sanskrit for that is agyaya, or knowing. But that knowing, Prabhupada translated into sharp intelligence. And what he did was he took the Kshatriya jewel from his forehead with his sword and disfigured his haircut so that his hair was growing out in little patches. And it was very insulting and humiliating for a Kshatriya or for anyone to have that kind of thing done to him. And he was driven away. So sometimes it's of course, in those cases, in the case of knowing what to do, Arjuna had drawn on some Vedic wisdom. It was actually written that this is the proper way to punish a person who has committed a grave act, who is a Brahmin. But there are some instances that in the Shastras, they're not in the Shastras, they're more in the there are in the Shastras, of people that make compromises. They do things that aren't scripturally condoned. And one example is of Sanatana Goswami when he was, of Raghunath Goswami, when he was escaping. And Sanatana Goswami also, once he was going to see Lord Chaitanya. And he learned that the person who accommodated him was going to kill him. and his servant, because he had learned that the servant was carrying gold, a fairly large quantity of gold with him. So he had made a plan to kill Sanatan and his servant Ishan and take the gold. And it's also narrated in that Chaitanya Charita, I think it's in the 10th chapter of the Adi Leela, that that Sanatan Goswami, because he was an expert diplomat in his previous life, working for a Muslim ruler, could understand that this hotel keeper was very attentive to their everyday needs, and that something was improper about that, because actually this man was the head of all the thieves of the land. He was actually a rogue, but because he was so attentive to Sanatan Goswami and his servant, he knew something fishy was going on, something wrong was going on, and he kind of deduced that he knew that either Sanatan or Ishan was carrying gold. And he asked his servant, he said, Are you in possession of any riches or gold? And the servant said yes. He admitted that he was, and he said, well, you must give it to the hotel keeper. So he gave it to the hotel keeper on the strength that the hotel keeper would help Sanatan through the jungle and Ishan through the jungle, or the hill tract, as it was called in the Chaitanya Chaitamrita. So this was an incident of him thinking on his feet. And another incident that occurred that it was an incident of thinking on his feet by Sanatan, was when he was jailed by the Nawab for dereliction of duty, because he was hearing Srimad Bhagavatam at home instead of serving the Nawab. The Nawab put him in prison. And he escaped prison by using a trick. The Prabhupada uses the word trick. And the trick was that he told the person that was in charge that was looking after the prison, that was looking after him, that he had to answer the call of nature, and that he'd have to go to the river to do it. And then on the way to the river, he told the person looking after him that he would jump into the river, and that way he would escape. And he would have the shackles all removed from him. Well, actually, they were removed before. So the jail keeper then said that well, maybe that's a good idea, but if I tell the ruler that you escaped somehow, I'm going to be probably executed. And so then the further contrivance of the trick was that you tell the ruler that I all of a sudden jumped into the river, and it was moving so fast that you couldn't find me. And the jail keepers thought that was a worthwhile thing to say, and Sanatan that way escaped without jumping into the river. He escaped the jailer. Another example of thinking on one's feet was done by Raghunath Goswami. Raghunath was the son of the Majumdar, the son of Haranya, I think. Yeah, Haranya Gajumna, and his father was Govardhan Rajuna. One of them was the father, and one of them was the uncle. Anyway, they were tax collectors, and they were keeping some of the money for themselves. And this the Muslim authorities, who were then in charge of the country, got wind of this, and they came to arrest the two brothers. But the two brothers got wind of the fact that they were going to be arrested for embezzling, and of course they were devotees, but those things were excused in those days by the general society. So they got wind of it, and when the person who was going to arrest them appeared on the scene, only Raghunath was there, and he was just under 20 years old at the time, and he settled the matter very amicably with the arrestor. Somehow or other, he spoke with him in such a way that the person who had come to arrest the father and the uncle was convinced that he was wrong, that they were right, and that he shouldn't arrest them or shouldn't arrest their son. And he did arrest Raghunath at first, but then he released him because Raghunath was so convincing that he was just thought of as being a very innocent and helpless person. So these are examples of thinking on our feet, and that's what an expert preacher does. I think Prabhupada was expert about this, and so is Bhaktisiddhanta. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, there's photographs of him wearing Western clothes and riding in a convertible motor car. Prabhupada called them motor cars. We call them cars or convertibles. And when he was challenged by this, he said that, just if you have to do it, just ride in a motor car. It's no big one. And just to speak to the situation. Another example of thinking on one's feet is that one of the people in the audience, I think it was an audience somewhere in India, had read that Sanatana Goswami had a touchstone, something that when you touched it would turn iron into gold, or turn anything into gold. And the questioner asked Prabhupada, he said, so should I learn that iron and gold are the same, and I should reject anything that's golden as useless? And Prabhupada knew that this person was not very far along, because the Chaitanya Charitamrita is considered the postgraduate study of Vedic philosophy. And he kind of knew that the man was a neophyte or a rookie or a newcomer, and he said, you can't say that gold and iron are equal. He said, if you go to a pawn shop, he told the man, and you with a piece of iron, and you say you want millions of dollars because it's actually gold, will you be believed? And the man had to admit, no, I won't be believed. So this is an example of gross example of how one has to adjust things according to the situation and give practical examples. So Raghunath, in addition to being a very highly advanced devotee, was a very practical person, and because of his knowledge of diplomacy, was able to do very wonderful things. Of course, we can't imitate these Goswamis like Raghunath Goswami because they had identities in Krishna Lila. I think Raghunath Goswami is characterized as Rata Manjari in Krishna Lila. So they were an ordinary people, these 6 Goswamis. When we worship them, we can't imitate them. We just have to do what they say and follow in their footsteps, but we can't be like they were, or we can't be like Ramananda Roy and Haridas. They were completely free of carnal desires. We can't imitate that, but we can hold them up as paragons of the kind of virtue that we think is perfection. That they're not ordinary people, and if we think they're ordinary people, that's kind of an offense. Just like so many things are offensive. Anyways, I think I ought to stop here. And if there's any comments or questions, please feel free. Yes?
I'm kind of wondering about this point about gold. It seems like the verses are saying that like the gold is not so good, and it's where the personality of Kali resides, but Prabhupada seems to be saying in the purport to use gold in the currency. So is that contradictory, or is it not?
Well, I mean, shastrically speaking, in an advanced way, gold is kind of a useless commodity. It's just something that should be thrown in the river and abandoned. In a very advanced way, one doesn't see the difference between gold and iron. But for purposes of the people that read these books, which are the general public, or the great unwashed as they're called in New Zealand, one has to make a distinction, and therefore the idea of gold coinage is supported. The idea that you can use the exchange of gold as long as there aren't paper currencies issued in excess of the amount of gold that actually exists. But there's some need. I mean, in olden days there weren't any means of exchange. Everything was done pretty much by barter. Like they would do a service or give something for something else, a tangible item, instead of exchanges like coins. So in these days, when these books were written from 1963 on, or 60, whenever he started writing them, 66, 67, People were using forms of exchange, paper and coins, but in the ultimate issue, those things are just ridiculously unuseful. But in the modern age, they are useful. Gold exchange. There was a silver exchange and a gold exchange, and Prabhupada was advocating. I think he says that Kali was gold standardized. Kind of an interesting comment in the purport. But he's advocating the gold standard in gold coins, as long as there's not excessive artificial inflation, paper money issued in excess of what's actually printed, or what's actually what's actually available in the real gold. Yes.
Thank you very much for the class. I just wanted to share humorous comment on the situation with Arjuna and Ashwatthama. Krishna was advising to kill Ashwatthama and Draupadi not to kill him. So the comment was, Arjuna thought that Krishna will sooner or later go back to his Dwarka, but he has to live with his wife. I mean, Arjuna has to live with his wife. That's why he chose
Thank you.
to kill.
There are a few other instances where Krishna seems to be in violation of scriptural principles. One was that when Bhima was fighting with Jarasandha, it went on for a long time, and finally Krishna gave a little gesture that showed that if Bhima, he could kill Jarasandha by tearing him in half, basically. Because he was in two bodies when he was born, and he was joined by a demonic lady who put the two parts of his body together. And other instances is when there was a club fight between Duryodhana and Bhima. It went on for a long time, but Krishna knew that there was a part of Duryodhana's body that was not ironized. He had been ironized by Duryodhana's wife, Gandhari. But when he was on his way to get ironized, he was completely naked, and Krishna saw him, and he knew what was going to happen. So he said that at least if you're going to see your mother, put on something on the middle part of your body. So when she took off her blindfold and tried to make his body completely iron, she was very disappointed that he had something around his waist like a girdle, and then she kind of deduced that was Krishna's trick, that somehow or other that he had a weak part of his body. So, but Krishna knew this when Bhima was fighting with Duryodhana, and he gave him a little hint that you can kill him if you hit him below the waist. And hitting below the waist is against Kshatriya principles. I think it's against Vedic principles. And in this way, he was able to be victorious in the club fight. So sometimes even Krishna had to do things that were scripturally unauthorized. Another example is when Krishna was in the battle of Kurukshetra, he was the driver of Arjuna, and Bhishma decided that Arjuna would have to break his promise not to get into the warfare, into the battle, and not to take arms against anyone. But because Arjuna, he fought so valiantly that Arjuna was almost dead. His chariot was broken, and Arjuna and Krishna, you saw the famous picture, Krishna picked up the wheel and started spinning it like a chakra and progressed towards Bhishma as if to kill him. So even though he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead and he made a promise, he had to break that promise. That he took arms against Bhishma, took arms against the Kuru dynasty. So sometimes it happens that one has to think beyond what's written in the books. Sometimes people think that if we just rely on what's written in the books, that we're too doctrinaire or too dogmatic and not really practical. So that's the reason that one has to sometimes think out of the box, so to speak. Any others? Comments? Yes?
Sichuan. They were buying gold, and when the gold price went up, they saw that they made money from it. And Prabhupada said, no, this is going to be good, right? And then another time I read, Prabhupada was saying, what is paper money, it's worthless. The real value is gold or silver. And now we just have this whole thing with the world situation. And a friend of mine, he buys silver. And he said, you know, I could go and buy the silver, no problem. But he said, as soon as this whole world situation came about, people were lining up to buy gold and silver. And he said, now you can't buy any silver because everyone's bought it. Right? So, as far as devotees are concerned, is it a good thing to invest in silver in the thought of the future that the whole paper money situation might just become like a, in the past when money became worthless, that your gold and silver will always be valuable?
Well, from my studies in physics, the law of entropy says that everything is going to disintegrate, including gold and iron and silver. And another thing I read was that the world's wealth is invested in fine art, in blue chip stocks, and in precious metals. But the history has shown that things have changed. Gold was priced at $400 US dollars per ounce. And then all of a sudden it dropped out and it became almost worthless. So the same thing happens with silver, and the same thing happens with land and with art and with almost everything. Prabhupada said that, as it said in many places, he taught us that real wealth is in the land and in cows. That's real wealth. That can never be destroyed, taken away. It's never going to change. And even though in this age the values of land does change, and the values of animals does change, in the long run it doesn't change. That's if I think one of the richest people in the world is the man who owns all the land in central London, the Duke of something or other, Duke of I can't remember his name. Anyway, because he owns that land, he's considered to be wealthier than Bill Gates or anyone else is considered very wealthy because he owns the land. It's some of the most valuable and precious land in the world, central London, Mayfair district. Anyway, that's the stuff you don't read in Fortune magazine. But people are expert in hiding their wealth. If they're very wealthy, they know how to hide it. So, anything else? Yes?
Well, you see the world situation at the moment, and it's in a way difficult to understand. I mean, it's all controlled by the demons, of course, but they are now, they've closed all our temples, they've closed all the churches, everything to do with religion, they've closed. And you would think that they would allow people to go to their churches and mosques and temples because it keeps the sanity of the people, right? But they're opening the football matches, they're opening the casinos, and went to a market on the weekend, there were hundreds of people there, but they won't let us go to our temples are empty. Here, little different in different places where haven't been able to go for 3 months, and different states have got different rules. So are we looking at a situation where we might never go back to normal as far as going to our temples and all that?
Don't take birth in Kali Yuga. That's the only way out, I know. Or, outside of the 10,000 year period of piety. But out of 432,000, it's not a very long period. Just don't take birth in Kali Yuga again, because these are symptoms of the demonic people that are in charge of the age. Yeah, there's always a bit of an enclave of piety, even in the midst of degradation. And this is one of them, where we are now. And people that are fortunate to be hearing talks about Srimad Bhagavatam and, that are broadcast, or anything that's said by any devotee anywhere. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.